Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high-performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. And today I'm bringing you a new and exciting interview episode. My guest today is scientist and entrepreneur Flavio Somanji. And Flavio is a scientist by training, and he currently works for the Novartis Institutes for BioMedical Sciences, where he studies mechanisms of cancer cell resistance to once effective therapies and how to overcome it. And he's also an entrepreneur and the founder of EcoDemand, an online marketplace built to reinvigorate the capitalist market by putting consumers at the forefront while enabling small businesses to thrive amidst fervent competition. So welcome, Flavio, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, I'm looking forward to our conversation. Since you're a scientist, I would love to hear your thoughts on the current state of the pandemic, with the restrictions being lifted in so many places, despite the infection numbers being super high. For instance, in Germany, we have about 200,000 new COVID cases per day right now. So as a scientist, do you think this is the time to lift all the restrictions?
Sure, thanks for the question. And I'd like to premise my answer saying it is coming from me and not reflective on Novartis's position, as it
Sure.
started off saying I work for Novartis. I think, yes, it's long overdue. I believe if you go back, a couple of months now, perhaps even a year, we knew that COVID is not as severe of a disease as it is mainly the population now that is being vaccinated. So kids under the age of maybe 13 or so, they have symptoms just like the ordinary flu, and so they're very low risk, and they are the least people who have been vaccinated. I know they're getting up to par in terms of the percentage of folks who are getting vaccinated. So overall, if we look at the number of folks who have been vaccinated, mainly the elderly and those who have comorbidities, that number is very high. And in terms of the number of fully vaccinated, and I say that in quotes because what does that exactly mean? So now know there are talks of, the fourth boosters here in the US, or I'm sorry, the second booster, which is the full shot. And so at the end of the day, it's personal choices. The testing you mentioned of the numbers going up, that actually is not a great measure right now. We would tend to look at the severity of the cases, so hospitalizations and death, and those are steadily declining. So I definitely think it's time for us to live our lives.
Right. That's good to hear. I mean, I think I have read that hospitalization rate is actually going up over here again. But yeah, so from a scientific point of view, what do you think would be the best way out of the pandemic? Just drop all the restrictions and let it run its course? Or is there something that we should actually be doing?
Yeah, so this is quite difficult to look, right? I mean, clearly we've all been affected by the pandemic, right? The virus itself. But what are the ramifications of the measures that have been put in place, such as the lockdowns, kids not going to school and the like, the social aspect of our livelihoods as humans? We are social beings. So that's been disrupted over the past 2 years. 2 years plus now, and it's not conducive to our mental well-being. And we all know that's very important, not only to our sanity, but also to our work productivity. So I'm quite happy, actually, I can say this for Novartis. Here in Cambridge, they have actually relaxed all their policies in terms of wearing masks in the building, and the like. So it's really good to see people's smiles when you work, together, and just having conversations, grabbing lunch with one another. So it's really cool, and I'm looking forward to returning to the norm, if you will. I mean, clearly there are things we've learned that we should keep in terms of remote work and the like, flexibility of schedules. But I think it's long overdue that we get back to some sort of normality.
Oh, that would be nice. The past couple of years have been really tough, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. With your background in biology and bioengineering and biomedical engineering, what prompted you to venture outside the world of science and start your own business?
Thanks for the question. That's very timely, especially in terms of the innovation that needs to take place to bring forth not only vaccines but also diagnostic tools. As you can remember, during the start of the pandemic, we were running helter skelter to pull resources together to get going. So that tells you entrepreneurship is very vital to our sustenance as human beings, right? So if you look at Operation Warp Speed here in the US, which pulled not only private resources, but also public-private partnerships to get things going, then you get to say, wow, we could accomplish a lot. So now looking at what I do or why I got into it, initially, going to school, studying medicine or studying biology and neuroscience to get into medicine, I found that it wasn't really quite what I wanted to do, when I graduated. And in undergrad, I had the opportunity to work in a research lab at Syracuse University. So I got open, or this door opened up to me of research that I never knew existed before. And after graduating, I worked for a company, Canon US Life Sciences. It's no longer operational, but I got my first, feel of the corporate world. And I thought to myself, this is really cool. I spent a year there, and it was learning just the business aspect of things, got me going. But at the same time, I noticed I had so much time in my hands that I thought I could do more. And I decided to learn the basics of health economics. Because again, thinking, if I become a physician and I have to prescribe medicine to my patients and they can't afford that medicine, what happens? What's the underlying basis of health economics? So I took a course sponsored by the World Bank Group on that very same topic. And it really opened a portal wherein the concept of EcoDemand came about, which is, if you are a consumer, so you're looking to purchase the product or service, there are two things that are necessary, absolutely necessary for there to be a transaction. One is the ability for the consumer to make that purchase, so they have the funds to do so. And the second aspect or factor is their willingness to pay for that product. We do know you could have money and you're just not willing to pay for it, whatever, right? So how do we merge these two items? There was a great example in the course, and I like to use this all the time when I try to explain EcoDemand, is, let's say you are willing to pay for a Ferrari. Sure, that's all nice. I know most people would be willing to, but you're not able to. You don't have the funds. Okay, no transaction happens, right? On the contrary, let's say you're able to pay for a Ferrari, which is very cool. Maybe you are, that's great. I clearly am not at this stage, but let's say you're able to, but you just don't care for a Ferrari. Maybe you prefer a Porsche instead, or BMW, what have you. Again, no transaction happens. So now merging those two aspects wherein consumers would state the price of the product, which is where EcoDemand comes in. We allow consumers to state the price of what they're looking to purchase. And by doing so on our platform, it accounts for their willingness to do so. So we sort of kind of like bring those two aspects together. And that's how EcoDemand came about.
Right. Great story. I mean, it sounds like, well, the general problem of people trying to find the right customers for their products or services. Because as a coach, for instance, I have the same problem, right? I mean, there might be people out there who would love to have my help, but who are not able to pay for it. And then there are the people who really need my help, but don't want it,
Right.
even though they could pay for it.
Right, exactly.
Which is kind of sounds kind of like the same thing. Now,
Exactly.
how did you experience that transition from academia or the pharma industry to entrepreneurship? Was it all smooth sailing, or was it a little bit difficult to get started?
Well, clearly, as your audience knows now, and I have no business background, right? So it was, trial and error and networking as well, like just being willing to put yourself out there. Because I've had sleepless nights sometimes, just thinking of how feasible it would be to launch a business, right? And it's taken me a little while. The platform actually just launched actually 2 months ago now, in January of this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So, and I conceived the idea about 5 or getting to 6 years ago.
Wow.
Finding the right people to work with as well is not always easy, but networking makes it easier. So that's something that I've been looking to do. And of course, I'm still, in the sciences. That's what I do. I try to make my entrepreneurship on par with my core interest and likeness for science. And so focusing now on products that are being used in the laboratory, that makes it a bit easier because I understand that realm, right? I understand the
Mm.
products that are being sold or used in that industry. And secondly, is just being, or I could say having the tenacity to take risks because
Mhm.
not everyone would like to take that risk, right? It's an investment from my part, not only in terms of money, but in terms of time, right? I could use the time I spend on EcoDemand, perhaps doing something else, maybe having fun like most people my age would do, right? Rather than working on a business. But I just think the rewards are so worth it. I
Mm.
mean, it's been really tough, and I'm only starting to see the fruits of it, but I will not do it any other way. I won't have it any other way for sure.
Oh, that's great. I certainly resonate with that story because it was kind of like the same for me when I stopped working at the university. So I'm a molecular biologist by profession as well, and no background in business whatsoever. And I found it to be really difficult to make that transition because it you have to have a completely different skill set to to get started. At least
Right.
that's what I found in my own experience. So what was it that you struggled with the most? So for me, for instance, I think it was just trusting my idea enough and putting myself out there for everyone to, there is always the possibility that you publicly fail, right? So I was really terrified of just putting myself out there and fail, something like that. So what was it for you that you struggled with the most?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example you gave. And I think it might be, I'm not sure, perhaps this has happened wherein you find folks from the business background venture into science. I don't know if it's bench science work that you can imagine could be very tough as well.
Yeah.
But not saying it's not doable. So in that respect, I think moving or not having a business background and venturing into business has been done a lot more, right?
Mm.
Most
Yeah.
businesses were actually started by people without business backgrounds. For me, what I've struggled with is actually leveraging my skill as an outgoing person to actually bring on board folks that I want to work with. Because I'm very protective of my idea. And of course, especially when you get to a point where you're starting to see some success, then everyone now wants to be part of that success. So I've had difficulties in the very beginning with just the idea, right? So recruiting folks to see the vision, it's really tough. So I had to actually take things in my own hand. I served as the UI UX designer for the platform, spending tremendous amount of time just putting that together. Of course, it's not perfect. It's not what I do, but I had to get my hands dirty if I needed for a developer to actually see and understand the vision. So bringing on board a designer whom, of course, I contacted a bunch of them because I know I can't do all by myself. I need
Yeah.
your help. But for them to actually understand what I want, it was
Uh,
really tough. So I had to do it myself, or at least take it to a level where then they might understand and perhaps expound on it. But also, I
mm.
could have just gone directly to a developer to help me get it to where it is now.
I love that. It reminds me so much of my own process. I think as scientists, we are prone to just trying to figure it out alone on our on our own, right? So
Right.
in the process, I learned like all the things, how to do websites, how to do SEO, how to do social media, how to do graphic design, how to do all the things because it was kind of clear in my head, but I couldn't communicate it. So I thought I'd just do it all myself.
Well, you have to be willing to do it, right? Who else is going
Right.
to do it? Yeah, so you're absolutely spot on.
So how have you approached that challenge? Is that challenge? What have you done to maybe overcome it, and how has that worked out for you so far?
Yeah, so I believe just the partnerships I've had along the way to get to where I am, and not all have been, the best, I would say, as you can imagine, with me premising earlier that I still am, but I was very protective of what I was working on, not just to bring on board anyone, right? Because as a business, even family members, right? You have to set some boundaries because I have some
Sure.
family members who be, yeah, let's, I know you're working on that. Let's work on it together. But I have to take my time and be diligent as to whom I work with. Just because you're a family member doesn't mean I necessarily want to work with you. Nothing against that person, right? But
Yeah.
I just need to be diligent. So getting in contact with folks whom I thought would be absolutely essential to get me to that next level over the course of the past couple of years, I've learned a lot, right? What to say, what not to say, when to, bring on board external assets and when to use in-house assets. And just that knowledge and perhaps the patience of not having everything at once or when I want it has been really key for me to moving forward, right? Because as an entrepreneur, we know things take time, right? But
Hmm.
it's like, why can't I just have it now, right?
Yeah.
I it speaks to what you were saying earlier. Like most folks want early success. I want to start a bit. I just want to get rich overnight, what
Yeah.
have you. But you need to have some patience and know that some things will take time. Maybe some are within your control, others might not be. Um, One thing I would add is getting into competitions has helped me a lot just to get feedback. Because you mentioned earlier, you know, I guess self-validation or validating your idea. And
Hmm.
that's what's actually comforted me a lot when I've gotten into competitions in the past. Not necessarily with the goal of winning. Of course, winning would be great, right?
Sure.
But just to get feedback on the idea. And that helped me tremendously, just knowing that there's some validation to what I'm working on.
Oh, absolutely. Feedback is always a good thing, but you also have to be you have to develop the strength to take critical feedback, right? Because a lot of people they do not ask for feedback because they are too afraid that it might not be what they want to hear. So this also takes some personal development and just, trusting yourself enough to stick with what you think is right, but still take constructive criticism on board. Now,
Absolutely.
what has been the maybe most valuable lesson that you've learned so far when it comes to entrepreneurship? Is there some piece of advice that you would like to share with someone who might be contemplating starting their own business?
Yeah. This I'm about to give it an advice that I know I've given someone and they haven't taken that, or I could not see them in a million years take, which is you don't need a business background to start a
Mm,
business.
that's
That's
true.
that's a very fundamental advice because some folk would want to, go to business school, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, that would definitely set you perhaps a couple of years, maybe if I'm being very conservative, months ahead. But you don't need it. What you need is to surround yourself around folks, mentors, who would provide you the guidance in areas you're lacking, right? Because even as scientists, we do employ some business management skills, right? As a scientist, I need to manage my time wisely, design experiments, which could be, designing partnerships and the like, or evaluating what partnerships I want to have now versus later. And maybe within the same realm of you don't need a business background to start a businesses. Just do it. Just do it. I told myself when I started EcoDemand, like, I have nothing to lose. I just have to start it. And the main reason I actually pushed forward is I was racing against time with myself in terms of the name EcoDemand. Because when I locked on that name, I was like, wow, this is so great. So the first thing I had to do was buy the domain name, right?
Yeah.
So that was how I literally started the company. So I just made that move, and I knew I couldn't just sit on it and say, oh, I'll do it later. I had to act on it now, or back then, right? I had to do something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all have to start before we feel ready, because we might never feel ready. Because all the growth that happens usually happens outside of our comfort zone. And per definition, that's where you don't feel like you're ready. Like, you don't want to take that action. It's uncomfortable, and you still have to do it if you want to get started. Now that we know what you've been maybe struggling with, but let's look on the bright side. So what do you find most rewarding about the work that you do?
So in the past couple of months would be actually getting the first transactions happen on the platform. So the first, I guess revenue coming in, that's very sweet. I have to say, use a very basic term here. But if I don't mind going back a bit, I'll pick up from what we left off on the last section, which is getting out of your comfort zone. I know there were certain things that I wanted to do before I launched the company, or I could have held back and not launched. And I told myself, well, if I keep waiting for the perfect platform, I'm never going to get there.
Yeah.
And so I had to say, okay, you know what? There are things that I just have to also get feedback from potential users that would actually validate the platform and make it better, right? So it's like building a car and you keep making modifications and never having an end user tell you, oh, I would like this here versus over here. So I needed to launch and get there. But once that happened, and I started also getting feedback, that's so rewarding. It was like I might have spent ages continuing to develop the platform and not get that critical feedback had I not launched it. So that's, wow, I love this. You're accepting the platform, but you're saying you prefer this aspect versus that. Okay, that's great. Let's continue building upon it. So that's been really, really great to get back from the current users.
Yeah, that's kind of like a bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? You kind of have to put something out there to get the feedback, but you also have to have some things in place before you can get it out there. So kind of like, well, you just have to do it.
Yeah, don't even get me on that part about the chicken and egg, because it's a two-sided platform, so that makes it even tougher, right?
Yeah,
To get
sure.
both consumers and then the vendors. So that's really tricky. But overall, it's been a nice process, and getting to speak with folks that I would otherwise not speak with, right? I'm now using marketing skills. I'm not a marketer at all. I mean, at some point, I'd want to hire someone who does that.
Yeah.
I have to speak with consumers, speak with marketers as well, potentially to bring them on board. So it's really rewarding to have more interactions than I would have had otherwise, should I have been on the lab bench, right? So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the thing that I love about what I do right now the most as well. It's just meeting so many interesting people from all around the world. That's why I fell in love with podcasting.
Nice, very nice.
So, where do you want to take your business within the next, say, 1 to 2 years?
That's a good question. So we've definitely from inception or conception, now we've reached the 5 year mark. So it might be easier for me to project 5 years, but
Okay.
I could go 1 year. I could go 2 years. It's a bit tricky. And these are things I'm not used to, right? Looking into the future, because I like to premise my life. And this is why I actually had to start the business, right? So I'll use another car example. It turns out I like cars now. So I picture my life as being in the car. Of course, I'm the driver at night, and I can only see so far with my headlamps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I keep going, then the path opens up. So if you want to know, like, if you want to see far ahead before you could start making moves to go on that journey, it's just not going to happen, right? So you have to take it step by step. So I'm not big on like making projections for the very, very long run. But given that I've had 5 years now from, when I actually conceived the idea to where I am, I feel more comfortable at least discussing the next 5 years. So with that being said, I think it would be feasible to have grown the business, the user base, very much so that I actually can focus more on my time as a scientist, because that's really my core interest, right? And the reason I actually started EcoDemand too was to have side funds coming in. The money is just coming in, and I'm not doing much, right? But it takes hard work to get there. In the next 1 or 2 years, I think we'll be forming very strategic partnerships with folks who would help that growth potential to even higher levels. And then perhaps also starting to talk with investors, right? Perhaps in the next 2 years or so, because the reason I haven't reached out to any venture capitalist funding or firms is I don't want to undersell myself without having anything to show for it, right? Now I have vendors and consumers on the platform. You're making requests, making purchases and the like. If you now can show something to an interested party who would want to invest, or they see the value, then yeah, you get to keep more ownership of what you've built, versus when you don't have anything before. They'll probably give you less for more equity stake in the company, which is not ideal for a good entrepreneur.
True. So you've already touched on that, but can you go into a little bit more detail of what exactly it is that EcoDemand provides? So who are your ideal customers and what do you help them with? So you match the demand and the what people provide, but does it have a certain niche? So is it all about lab experiments, for instance, or who is it for? Is it for scientists?
Yeah, that's a good question as well, because the vision when I had EcoDemand, the vision for it was for anything, right? You can think of an Amazon, but even Amazon is not, you can't, there are certain things. For instance, the niche market in which we are, Amazon is not a big player in that industry. So the bioproducts and the like. But maybe 5-10 years from now, we could expand into other realms. Right now, we're focused on lab-based products. So research consumables, pipette tips, tissue culture flasks and dishes, lab equipment as well, PCR machines, you could have centrifuge machines and the like. So anything that a biotech company, you can imagine, would need to start up, they could probably put a request on EcoDemand and find it there, or have vendors eventually come on board to I guess, respond to it. And our niche consumers now are focused on academic institutions, so labs themselves. So you're probably very familiar with how this works. So we'll be contacting PIs in those labs and say, hey, we know you primarily work on research grants. You might want to stretch that out. EcoDemand could help save some money in that regard. It's an easier sell to consumers than it is to vendors, right? Consumers, of course, you're stating the price. Who does not want to state the price, how much to purchase the product, right? For the vendors, it's a bit trickier because you'd ask yourself, or the vendor would ask themselves, well, I already have streams of sales, right? I already use X, Y, and Z platform to sell my products. Why would I EcoDemand, right? Um, One of the sales we tell vendors is, well, you don't do anything. The consumers come to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So as a requester coming in, you just see them, it's a match, you could act on it or not, right? You have nothing to lose either until you sell the product. So how do we make money? Perhaps I'm skipping ahead of myself, but how do we make money? We make money on the transactions, on each transaction. So
Mm-hmm.
we take a percentage of every sale, and we onboard premium vendors, and we provide them a variety of dashboard analytical tools, and we also take a fee for that. That's the majority of the vendors who sign up. They opt in for that premium model. But of course, if they want to really make sure they don't lose any money, they could choose what we call the regular vendor accounts, and they don't pay anything upfront, and they only pay us when they sell the product. So again, you could say a win-win scenario for them.
Right. So could you also buy any kind of supplements? So could you go on the platform and say, okay, I would like to buy resveratrol or something like that, like something like a popular supplement. And could you find someone to manufacture that for you for a cheaper price?
Yeah, so we are not necessarily at this point wanting to make any sales ourselves as the company, as EcoDemand, but that could change in the future, right? So Amazon before did not sell products as Amazon. Now
Mhm.
they do, right? They did not have warehouses, but now they do, and they actually help other vendors sell their products faster, and that's how Prime came about. We are now not really I guess promoting ourselves as a platform where you could purchase supplements, because going back to the chicken and egg problem,
Mm.
if you make a request as a consumer and it doesn't get fulfilled, and we have a time frame for which we would like for those requests to be fulfilled. Excuse me one sec. So if it doesn't get fulfilled within that time, then it expires. Of course, no transaction happens. Does that consumer come back? That
Mhm.
could be an issue, right? So we are targeting consumers for whom there are vendors available to sell that product, if that
Right.
makes sense. So as we expand in the future, should we be bringing on board or expanding to other areas, maybe supplements and what have you,
Mhm.
then of course that's an easier sell to consumers. Hey, there are these products on here. You could definitely purchase them if you're interested in getting it.
Yeah, because that sounds very interesting. Like if you could get more vendors from that area, it will attract a lot of customers, I guess.
Yeah. And the other thing too is having multiple, because what we really would want to have to benefit the consumers is to drive competition rather than between consumers for one product and our premise. Let's use eBay this time. Enough about Amazon. So on eBay, you could go and bid for a product. For example, a vendor would have, I'm selling this product. Maybe you could buy now for $100. I'm making up an example. You could start a bidding process at $50, and then consumers would bid, oh, 55, 60, blah,
Hmm.
blah, blah. So they're competing with each other, the consumers, for that
Yeah.
product. But on our platform, the vendors compete with each other. So
Hmm.
consumer says, this is how much I'm willing to pay. All vendors who have that product get notified. Even if you don't have that product, you get notified nonetheless. You could choose to get notified to see what's out there, right? And you could adjust your inventory to fulfill that. But now those vendors who have the product get to compete with each other for that consumer's money, right?
Hmm.
So it's like a reverse of what is the traditional online e-commerce
Mm.
marketplaces.
Are you worried about quality though, when vendors have to compete to get the sale? Do you think quality will go down?
I haven't thought much about that, but the only reason I'm not worried about that is because we verify every vendor that's on the platform. So not anyone could go and register to be a vendor. So on eBay, for example, you could be a vendor as an individual. I could go create an account and sell a product. Ideally, we would want to get to that stage in the future wherein we can open it up to anyone who wants to sell a product, right? You could have something, a book at your home, you're done reading it, or whatever you don't want and you want to sell it, right? You could do that. But now we require for vendors to be verified. So they're actually legitimate businesses with a tax ID number. And in that way, we somewhat mitigate the liability that would come with having fake products, if you will, or low quality products, especially if you're dealing with life sciences,
Yeah, exactly.
industry. You need quality products.
You
So
do.
that's one thing I had to do to ensure that we don't lag on quality.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. So,
Yeah.
is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
What can I say besides thank you? I know it's been a very difficult past couple of years with the pandemic and not just the virus. I myself, I recovered from COVID. I had it earlier,
Mm.
late last year into this year. Um, it was very mild though for me, so I'm glad. I think it was the Omicron. I didn't lose my sense of smell or taste,
Mm.
and I recovered quite quickly. But what I'd like for your listeners to know is mentality plays a role. There's a
Yeah.
reason why there's such a thing as the placebo effect,
Mm-hmm.
right? And thinking about science or biomedicine per se, if you go now to a hospital or most pharmaceutical companies, and I'm not quite sure about all of Novartis's endeavors, they might cover some of this, but most pharmaceutical companies focus on biomedicine. And what does that mean? They focus on treating a specific, perhaps genetic condition, or it has an underlying biological reason for the cause of disease. So they treat with, health products like a drug, what have you. But there's another proposed method to patient care, which is called the biopsychosocial model. What is
Mm-hmm.
that? We are triune beings. We are not just a biological specimen, if you will. So the biopsychosocial model takes into account, yes, there's an established patient, let's say cancer, that patient has a specific underlying mutation that's causing the cancer or thought to cause the cancer. Yeah, we could treat them with what drugs have been approved. But what about your social life? Who is there to care for them at home? What about their psyche as well? What's your mental state of mind? All those things need to be taken into account when we're actually looking for optimal patient outcome. And I might ask your audience this question. When you treat a patient, a cancer patient, let's use that example again, or you have a clinical trial and you recruit patients with the same mutation because that's your target, that's the indicator, usually not all of them respond.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the average for cancer, respondents, and I'm being very high here, let's say 50% would respond to that treatment. They have the same biological attributes. Now, why would that be? Right? We're all individual beings, right? We need to treat ourselves as, or look at other modalities or causes to disease beyond the biomedicine, which is what's been pushed nowadays. I mean, of course, the biopsychosocial model has been around for, I think, 30 to 50 years. I'm not exactly sure, but it's not being talked about a lot. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that so much because that's actually exactly what I kind of do in my coaching as well. So my framework, my sustainable success framework is it's about nourishing your body, which is all about like physical health. Then it's about rewiring your mind, which is really about finding all the unsupportive thoughts and flipping them, reframing them. And the last bit is what I like to call healing your soul, but it's more about connection to others. So it's the social aspect, how you relate to others. So all of that comes together in my framework. And I think it's so important because there are these important studies, like you're probably familiar with the milkshake study, where I think it was Dr. Alia Crum, right, who showed the importance of mindset and how it really influences your whole physiology and all the outcomes that you see. So I think it's super important that you mentioned that. And I love that so much.
Yeah. I mean, I had to say something that would be worth your while, your listeners, that is.
Absolutely. So last but not least, what's the best place for our listeners to connect with you online?
I think it would be most easily LinkedIn. And I have presence on Facebook and no longer on Twitter. I don't know what happened there. I just lost access to my account. But the best place would be LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. So Flavio, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Take care and talk to you soon. Bye.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please take a sec to rate and review my show or share it with a friend. That way you can support the show and help me reach and support other entrepreneurs like yourself as well. If you would like my help to figure out how you can go from overwhelmed and overworked hustler to empowered and confident leader, check out my website at www.wiredforsuccess.solutions and book a free 20-minute strategy session with me. Can't wait to help you get wired for success. Until next time, take care. Bye.